healthcare system is broken, but it doesn't have to be. This is Revenue Cycle Optimized by Infinix Healthcare. We discuss the latest challenges in the revenue cycle space and provide actionable tips on how to overcome them at your organization.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Stuart Newsom, and today we're discussing how RCM Plus prioritizes denials by predicted reimbursement. So actually, this will be a live demo for this feature within the RCM Plus solution. And we all know what that means. Jonathan Aguiar is with us here today. So Jonathan, as you all know, is the Senior Solutions Engineer, and he's going to join me in the conversation on AI, automation, and revenue recovery predictabilities. It's going to be a lot of fun stuff, a lot of fun conversation. So how you doing today, Jonathan?
Doing great, Stuart. Happy to be here and always enjoy office hours tag teaming. It's going to be a little weird being on the reverse end asking the questions, but it's good. You got to switch it up every now and then.
That's correct. That's correct. Because as everyone knows, I'm typically like the host, and I ask all the questions for our guest. And we've done this before, but it's a little role reversal where Jonathan's going to ask me the questions, and I'll be the one doing the demo. So I'm in the hot seat here to make sure I do a good job.
And Stuart's very humble. Really, he's the RCM expert, so it makes sense for him to show off the RCM platform. So he's our RCM guy.
Appreciate that. But just kind of a quick synopsis of what we're going to talk about and kind of explain some of the terms that we've been throwing around here in the last couple of seconds. But today we're going to look at how RCM Plus helps denial teams move beyond static work lists by using prediction, prioritization, AI, both generative and agentic AI, to focus that effort on the denials that are most worth pursuing. So you're going to hear me have an emphasis on that. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, what's RCM Plus? Well, it's, for those who have been familiar with our platform, we do have a platform called ARDM, which is Accounts Receivable, AR, and Denials Management. It's undergone a name change where we're now calling it RCM Plus. And it follows suit with our philosophy here at Infinix that we're a tech plus services operation, meaning that obviously AI and automation is not going to solve everything involved in RCM, because we all know that RCM is such a complex workflow, complex system, whatever you want to call it. We could call it a lot of things, right? But it's definitely something that can't be fully automated, at least yet. And I don't think it ever will be. So it's going to always require some human in the loop aspect of that. So this is no different, as you will see as we go through the demonstration. So with that, Jonathan, I think we're ready to get into you firing away with some questions. So
yeah,
hit me with your best shot.
Well, to be transparent, a lot of these questions were planned, so it will be my best shot. But maybe I'll throw in a question you didn't expect after.
Right.
But yeah, just a few questions just to kind of set the stage before we dive deep into the demo and get into it. So, question one. So, when you talk about revenue cycle with leaders, particularly about denials, what is something you hear most often about how their teams decide what to work first? And particularly, what's the priority in most of these teams?
Yeah, that's a great one, and I can say that that's top of mind for especially for RCM leaders. And what I hear most often is that there really usually is not a very disciplined answer to that question. And what I mean by that is, teams are often working from a combination of habit. We are creatures of habit. There's a certain sense of urgency, and all around some limited visibility to the data. And you really, those three ingredients are really a recipe for what I like to call RCM chaos, so to speak. So maybe they go after the highest dollar amount denials first. Stands to reason. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they?
Exactly. I mean, because it's, hey, we might as well focus all our effort on the highest dollar amount, right? If we're going to spend the time to go after denial, let's pick those that have the most revenue that will benefit for us. They'll also, whatever is getting closest to those timely filing limits, that's where that urgency comes in. Because many of these claims, you have an aging bucket that could be 120 days plus. We've seen even 180 days plus in some instances, and you have just a certain amount of time to get that denial work before it expires and you can not go after it anymore. So there's definitely a sense of urgency in that.
Yeah, and
yeah, go
I
ahead.
imagine just the volume alone, just trying to manage how many things are being thrown at you. I mean, anyone can relate to that. And that's just not just a healthcare issue, but especially in healthcare, when you got money and patients tied to all these items and you don't have any structure behind it, it's challenging, like actually understanding with that volume how to work those denials, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. And typically, which kind of brings to the last point, which is habit. Sometimes it's just whatever looks easiest to resolve, better known as cherry picking, right?
Yeah.
As humans, we're gonna always gravitate to, okay, well, what's the easiest and I can get done the quickest? Because not all denials are created equal. Some are very complex, where others are just easy to correct and move on. Some payer mixes are easier to work with than others. So you may have someone who's just so used to that Aetna payer and that certain denial type. And so they'll pick those. So this really is a challenge, that none of those approaches necessarily tell us, what is most recoverable, right? They're
Yeah.
just kind of gut feeling, nuances for what seems to be the right approach. But a high balanced denial may look important, but that doesn't mean it's the one that's most likely to pay or yield the best return on effort. And that's the key word, is effort. How can we maximize the effort to get the most money possible? Where are you investing your time to recover the revenue that's rightly yours? So from the start, many teams are not really working from a recovery strategy. They're working from a queue strategy.
Hmm.
Just want to get the queue empty and move on.
Yeah. Well, and I understand that as like an individual contributor for a lot of my career, you just want to execute. Like, what's my job? How do I do my job well? And what do I expect daily? So I think, kind of sneak peek, like the software really helps with that prioritization to ensure that the staff aren't having to do that heavy mental work of, all right, where do I start?
Right, exactly. And so, and I think to the second part of your question there, when it was like, what is the big problem on the surface? The biggest balances look like so reasonable, you know, and though it does sound very reasonable, for a long time, that's been really that default logic. When any manager is has to manage this, it's, yeah, let's go for those high dollar amounts. But build amount and expected recovery are not really the same thing. Denial with a large balance may have a low likelihood of reimbursement, or the expected payment may be much lower than it appears on paper. So while a smaller denial may actually have a much stronger likelihood of recovery and better expected yield. So when teams prioritize purely by charge amount, they can spend a lot of time chasing claims that are less valuable than they appear.
Hmm.
Thus, they're wasting time while, more recoverable opportunities sit lower in the queue. And that's where the prioritization model really starts to change the conversation. What we're going to be talking about and show you, because it shifts that mindset and that focus from what looks biggest to what is actually worth working. And then to your last point about volume, just kind of want to come back to that because I don't know if my answer was all that adequate, but the problem is not just the size of the denial inventory, but it's the lack of structure around how that inventory gets worked. And we've spoken to many clients, and you've been on those calls with me, where they're just like, I just don't know what my people are working on, right?
Hmm.
We have queues, and that mindset is, I'm just working the queue. I want to empty the queue, and whether it's getting paid on the back end, that particular user may not care. I know that's very strong, because I know they care about their job, but it's pretty much the mindset is, okay, I'm done for the day,
Hmm.
But this actually has intentional purpose, to it. So when there's no strong prioritization model like the ones that we have that are driven by both generative and agentic AI, teams can end up with any inconsistent workflows. Different people make different decisions about what deserves attention. Some claims get overworked, some get ignored, and the right staff are not always focused on the right denial types or payers. So that's where orchestration really matters. It's not just about scoring claims, it's about creating a more disciplined operating model where you can identify what matters most, route the work more intelligently, and support your teams with a clear path, to the action they need to take to make sure they're recovering the revenue. So do you have any other questions,
Well,
Jonathan?
you said orchestration and my ears perked. Like for anyone listening, Infinex is really big on that, and it is the correct way to automate and I'm speaking from a sales engineer perspective, any vendor that says we automate 100% of the time, they're lying. There's no way to do that in healthcare. That, as you all know, payers are not created equal. So you got to roll with the punches with what's available to you in that integration world. So yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's all about orchestration, which to me is such a beautiful word because you can just picture, everything just being done in the background to make sure that the right denial is getting to the right person. And is AI taking care of that? And it's actually that agentic AI that's actually taking care of this is the denial that needs to be worked over and beyond any other denial. Right now, in this moment, it's the most important denial for you to work. You work it, and then there's another one. This is the most important enough for you to work. And that's
Yeah,
kind of the shift that we have to take in order to take a look at that because you're maximizing your effort. And I'll get into that a little more details as we get into the demo.
sounds great.
But right now I'm going to transition into just want to show a little slide deck for everyone. And I know everyone can appreciate PowerPoint, we're certainly no exception. But I just want to quickly go over, this one slide. And I promise it's only one slide. But what this slide represents is a simple operating flow behind the demo that we're about to show. So first, an AI agent analyzes the AR and denial inventory, then predicts what is actually recoverable. Then next, it prioritizes work based on that prediction. So obviously, if you're predicting, what's recoverable, then you're going to maximize what's the highest, most expensive denials that are from a recovery standpoint. Then from there, that AI agent, with the help of automation workflows, assigns who recovers that revenue and optimizes the process throughout the whole process, if you will. So we call this orchestration, as we were explaining earlier, of both AI, both generative and agentic, as well as human specialists or human in the loop, as the industry is stating today. So rather than spending time on the slide itself, just want to move into what that looks like in the actual workflow. And we'll actually move into this. So this is the analytics slide. So Jonathan, just wanted to kind of see if we could kick some things off, if you had any questions regarding what we're seeing in front of us now.
Yeah, I do have one. So before we get into the individual claims, which is the meat of the matter, what are we looking at in terms of how we help a team understand real recovery? Is that in the AR platform in particular? Is there particular views that are more helpful than others?
Yep. That excellent question. So what we're looking at here is the analytics layer that helps establish the opportunity before any individual denials actually worked. And you got to go back to, hey, you got to know the data. You got to have an understanding of the data and be agile enough for that data to where you can drill down, as I like to say, and isolate certain information so you can have an understanding of what you're looking at. Certainly the AI and the machine learning models are working in the background to determine what is that net predicted recovery based on your total AR. But you actually have the ability to go in here and look at all these analytics ahead of time as well. So at a high levels, this gives you that visibility into the AR inventory, and it really helps separate the total outstanding dollars from what is actually likely to be recovered. So one of the most important concepts there is this net predicted revenue number here. You can see that we have a total AR of just under $10 million, but we're telling you, or the AI is actually telling you, that agent is telling you that it's really a $2.77 million in net predicted recovery. You might be thinking, well, that's a large gap. Well, yeah, we're also considering, or the agent's also considering the adjusted amounts, the co-pays, what it's maybe with some behavior of what that particular payer typically pays. Also looking at some of those combinations and claim data that's on there that probably could help recover even more of what's been denied. So instead of simply saying, here's the total balance, we can begin to understand what portion of that inventory appears recoverable based on prediction. And that changes how leaders think about the work in front of them. It gives them a clearer picture of where the true opportunity is and sets the foundation for that smarter prioritization. So if we go down here through the details, I've explained here how this is broken out. And before I move on any further, we do have some filters that can help guide you, that you can drill down and isolate the data even more. It's very dynamic and it's also very customizable. I won't get into the details here, but if there's a filter or a data point on an 835 and 837, perhaps your balance sheet, whatever data that we're using to pull in information, we can actually create a filter for that data point. And so this is very customizable. This is what comes out of the box, but then you can drill down and then filter this data accordingly. You can also just click on the data and drill down if you want. So if I just wanted to look at everything that was United Healthcare, I would just click here and it would change all of the information, all of the data points. Now, our net predicted recovery for United Healthcare is $500,000. And so just by drilling down on that data point, but you can have data points. And again, all of this is customizable. We can set this up on what you want to see and what's important to you. But many of our clients still are like, well, we don't know what we're missing. We don't know what we don't know. So we'll set up some things that we see commonly that's very helpful from an analytical standpoint. So you can drill this down by payer name, by plan name. If you have multiple locations, multiple practices, if you're a large health system, for instance, you can have this broken down by procedure group and then even the CPT code detail to see exactly where your net prediction would actually come from, by provider, as well as denial group and the specific denial code itself. Even segregated into your aging buckets as needed according to the denial groups, as well as the financial class, which you can actually drill down in here as well and get a sense of all the specific payer carriers, and also drill down and get to the specific plan level if you need to as well. And then, like anything, if you just click here, it'll drill down on all the data for that particular component of that filter. So that's the analytics, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's great. It makes sense why you would do this prior to actually prioritizing the work. And I feel like in a lot of platforms, that is what is lacking. It's like, why are we doing the work in the way we're doing it? So I think my question there is, could you show us an example of why the build amount alone could be misleading and how that prediction model changes what a team would actually work on first?
Yeah, and this is where the concept really becomes much more tangible, if you will. So with that in mind, we just want to kind of show this in essence where this particular example gives us that information, pretty handily. So as we look at these line items here, you can see that one denial may have a higher build amount, but the predicted payment is lower. So if you see this set up, we have the encounter charge, we have the net predicted recovery, we also have your adjusted and your net payments as well. So these four columns pulled together will show you, what was actually charged versus what was paid versus what was adjusted, and also you can get a sense of what was denied. And even if it was paid, there's even some opportunity to go rework that claim. Many people just work denials only. Some of them don't even go to the line item level and work the line item denials, which is you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And this will actually look at the instance where this could be a line item that you could get a little more recovery from, a little more revenue from. So it's actually, even though it's a paid claim, it's even looking at, hey, you could recover some additional revenue from this, whether it's through the appeals process or whether it's through refiling, whatever the case may be. So that's very important, because if a team is only looking at the gross dollars, being those encounter charge amounts, then they may naturally chase the larger balance first, which is what we discussed earlier. But when you introduce predicted payment, you start to see that the smaller claim may actually represent the better recovery opportunity. Thus, why spend time on the lower recovery opportunity? So this is one of the clearest examples of why build amount alone can be misleading. It doesn't really tell you what is truly worth the effort. So the prediction helps teams move from visual assumptions to a more informed recovery strategy. And to kind of get into the details here, obviously the highest claims here that actually has any opportunity for recovering revenue is this $19,000 amount. And it's going to yield, and it did pay not just under $1,000, but there's about $750 left on the table that's predicted recovery if worked correctly. Now, that's obviously a good priority. This would probably be high in the priority list, especially since it's in the aging bucket of over 181 days. It's pretty close to that timely filing status. So that's still considered. This is not the order. This is just the raw data from all the information that is shown above. And I actually filtered this down to where it was the medical necessity denial group that was the culprit. Everyone loves that medical necessity edit, just how vague, or denial code, how vague it can actually be. But if you drill down a little further into this information, you can see that we have a charge of $17,500 that's going to recover $27. And then here's a charge for just over $12,000, so it's going to recover $131. Now, I know these are minimum amounts, but it's another example of, well, are you better to go after the 17,000? Or are you better to go after the 12,000? Because here's the yield that it's going to predict to bring. But then you look at one that is, say, here's just over $1,200. 10% of this particular charge, right? It's still going to yield more than these two combined. And that's pretty powerful, where you can actually sit back and go, okay, well, that makes sense to spend all of our time and effort on this particular situation. And I bet, Jonathan, you're wondering, how does it do that?
Yeah, definitely. This is also making my math mind happy because it's just very logical. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm interested, like, with all those predictions in place, how does that actually change the order in which the denials are actually worked? Because it's nice to see the numbers, and trust me, I like numbers because I'm a nerd, but in terms of
Sure,
action,
absolutely.
what happens there?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great question, because this is where the prioritization really becomes what I like to call operational, because you have the
Right.
data. And our CEO JD Tandon coined it very well a couple of months ago on an office hours. It's death by dashboards, right? So
Yeah, it's the truth.
how can you take those analytics and put them into action, make them operational? So here's where it is. So once those predictions are in place, the system can begin ranking denials based on expected recovery, rather than just a balance or the aging or any gut feeling that people have, or manual judgment, or cherry picking, like I said earlier. So instead of relying on a static queue, teams can work from a list that is more closely aligned to their financial opportunity. And what that means in practice is that the work list becomes more disciplined. The denials rising to the top are not just the biggest or the oldest. They're the ones with the strongest combination of reimbursement likelihood and expected payment value. And it's all about value. It's the value of your staff's time. It's the value of that time that you're paying them to work that denial. So you're squeezing every single drop of revenue you can possibly out of managing your denials in doing it this way. So that helps reduce the guesswork, and it also creates a more consistent workflow across the team, because people are no longer relying solely on personal judgment, but about what looks most important. Because we'll get into this a little bit later, but everyone's measured with KPIs. And sometimes I think the KPIs are skewed because, as I said earlier, there are some denials that are more complex than others. So if you have the same KPIs across the board about how much revenue you're collecting or how many denials you're working, well, you may have a more complex denial that's skewing everything because it's going to take longer to work, right? Than those low hanging fruit, so to speak, that it's going to be much easier to work. So that's why people like to cherry pick so much, because, hey, not only are they easy, but it's going to improve my KPI. So I think you need to customize your KPIs based on that. And you can set up your workforce, so to speak, to make that happen as well. And so this is a good example of where it prioritizes. So once it predicts that revenue, then it's going to put it in the right order based on timely filing limits, yes, and then based on that propensity to pay, the net prediction that the payer is going to have, where the AI is actually looking into that revenue. And you can see where it's already grouped it, and we have different what we call work groups. And these work groups are pretty much exactly what they sound like. They're a group of people with certain parameters of what denials they're going to be responsible for. And so it just puts it, and it ranks it in what group it goes in, and then it ranks it in order of the encounter rank to that respected group. So when they log in to do their work, then this is what they're going to work first. They don't have to make a decision or use their cognitive reasoning to figure out, well, which one am I going to work first, and have to figure out on their own. It's already there in order which they need to work it.
This is making me smile because it's bringing me back to my help desk agent days where we'd have a ticket queue and then all the help desk people were like, oh great, a password reset. You could take the printer or network issues. I'll just reset this password real quick. So the cherry picking is real, but in the RCM world, one question I have is once you actually know which denials matter the most, the ranking happens. How do you make sure that the work is structured in a way that is not generic and it's actually pointed towards a particular queue that you're working on? Because even once work is distributed appropriately, a lot of people are accustomed to working on generic queues that there's still cherry picking involved. So I'm curious if the system has any way to avoid that generic queue need.
Oh, exactly. And that's where the orchestration comes in. Prioritization alone is helpful. Obviously, we've seen that, but it's not enough if the work still lands in a broad, undifferentiated kind of queue where it just kind of goes randomly in a queue or someone's still coming along going, yeah, this is great, but I'm still going to pick the ones I want to work. So what you want is a way to structure the work so that it can be assigned and managed with more intention. So here we can set up work groups and define those constraints along with some logic, which may include payer specific considerations. And I'll just drill down on an edit here. So here are two work groups that we've created, and you can create as many that makes this assignment much more easy or a lot easier as well. You can actually set up, and I won't get into too heavy of the weeds in here, but we have 4 human specialists that are involved that can, in this group, on average, we figure they can work at least maybe 30 denials a day. So we know that the production capacity for this group is 120 denials, right? And so just think about it. How many denials do you have out there on any given day? 120. Wow. Is that even going to put a dent? But you have multiple groups and you can set up multiple services. And by the way, Infinix does offer denials management services that can actually be subsequent to your staff, support your staff, not necessarily come in and do it all, but there's certain aspects that we can help take and alleviate some of that burden if needed. But here's where you can actually set up those criteria and those constraints along with that logic where you can set up certain attributes along with those operators, in which this particular example is where the financial responsibility is not in self-pay and the encounter line status equals, say, the ERS review, and also the AR balance is less than or greater than $0 in value. And you can set up any number of filters that you want to actually allocate that. So what this does is here you can actually set up work groups with defined constraints and logic. So you can actually go in here and be sure that it's all going to work together along with the AI and along with this logic. Instead of just saying these are the most important denials, the platform also helps support a framework, if you will, for who should be working them under what structure. So you're actually in control. And this is automation that we have built in that complements the generative AI and also the agents that we have working in here. It's not the automation or the AI, they're working in tandem. So it still goes back to part of that orchestration. And that's what makes this more than just an AI scoring story. It really becomes an orchestration model that helps align prioritization with that execution. So, do you have any questions or comments about that, Jonathan?
Well, you brought up orchestration again, and my ears perked up, believe it or not, even the second time. But having the customized capability of fine tuning those work queues, I think, in any product is crucial, especially if you're managing teams and processes. It's nice to have out of the box system related queues that do the job day in and day out. That automation, the agentic AI, the generative AI, that it's predictable, but there's always use cases where someone throws a wrench in the mix where, well, in my particular business model, these particular pairs are more challenging than others, and every specialty is going to be a little bit different. So I think having that capability of customizing those queues is a crucial item. So I'm glad you went into that.
Right on, right on. But there is one more aspect here that I think is also a problem because why would you work a denial that's probably not ready to be worked quite yet. So I want to ask you this question,
Yeah,
Jonathan, which is one of
flipping
the
it
other
around.
problems. Yeah. Yeah. So, because I think you can answer it better than I can is the only reason. So, well, it's not the only reason, but one of the other problems teams run into is spending that time on claims that are still, perhaps they're still pending. Again, kind of going back, they're not ready to be worked, right? Because they're still pending or not really ready, for action. Maybe they're paid. You go in there and you go, oh, this claim's been paid. Again, that may take a split second or a few seconds, but still those seconds add up. And it's the cognitive thinking and reasoning that someone's had to go through, right? So can you kind of talk about how claim status automation, which is a function that this solution has, helps with that?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, if you didn't ask the sales engineer automation question, then it's like, what am I doing here? So fair enough. Yeah, so in terms of automation, just to start, I think we have to go back to the actual process that we initially talked about, that identifying and analyzing prior to actual next steps. So it helps to identify the paid versus pending versus actual actionable denied claims. Once that's identified, it helps to actually prioritize those various items. So for paid, claims that have been adjudicated and paid, pending, the claims that are still in process with the payer, and denied claims, everyone knows what denied claims mean. But what that actually does is it reduces the wasted staff effort, because that is a lot of manual legwork. And to your point, it may take a second or two to be like, oh, that's already paid, or okay, that's a denial, I need to work. But a lot of that guesswork of constantly having to do that per case is what really drags people down when it comes to their bandwidth. So the automation being able to do a lot of that triage work, I think, is crucial in any field and any product, removing that human element of continuously asking the question of, okay, which one do I have to do first? So the AI is really doing a lot of that work. Something just kind of a punchy statement, like I think we've all been in Excel hell before, always doing that manual data pull, the pivot tables, the reconciliation across various spreadsheets. So being able to get out of that way of thinking of having to constantly map out all of the data points in an Excel sheet and being able just to prioritize the actual work being done is crucial. Root cause analysis is a big part of it too. So you kind of spoke into that with the denial intelligence and being able to drill down at a high level the specific codes, specific pairs, the particular encounters, in 3 to 4 clicks versus hours of manual analysis. So it's doing a lot of that, the brain work, and allowing the staff to actually execute. Going back to orchestration, I think that at this point, that's the buzzword of this call because I've made it so. But it is key. So the automation feeds directly into AI powered prioritization, which you went into. To summarize, that net predicted recovery is a big part of it. Understanding what that total recovery amount is, the prioritized work orders, using that intelligence to generate the actual work queues. This is a crucial item that wasn't mentioned yet, is the system is designed to do a daily snapshot. So every night the new data comes in so that the AI reruns and reprioritizes the entire portfolio. It's not just one section. So by doing that, it's able to allocate all those new cases coming in too, because not only is the bandwidth being sucked on existing cases, you got new things coming in every day in the pipe. So being able to prioritize those new items as well as those old items every day is another crucial thing that the AI handles. So it removes a lot of that guesswork, the aging logic, prioritizing that, using scientific ranked queues versus, well, I'm just going to pick this generic queue because this is what I've always done. It creates super employees, really. And I know in the wake of AI, a lot of people are nervous because it's new and there's, and layoffs are a real thing. But in this world, you can really think of AI as a co-pilot where they're making your job easier. So it's not necessarily that they're doing your job, it's that they're doing a lot of the legwork that allows you to do your job well and for you to do the job that you were actually hired to do, and not just that manual, here we go again with clicking through 100 pages to get to my actual job. So that's a mouthful, but any
No,
questions there, Stuart?
You said it great. No, I think it definitely is. It's sometimes the benefit that people don't realize, and we've realized this because we hear people say it all the time. It's not necessarily the work that it's helping you do, but it's eliminating the work you don't have to do that's saving so much time. It's
Yeah,
like, oh, I used to have to like you were saying, thumb through these pages and pages and pages, or I had to look and read this data, all to figure out that, hey, there's nothing I can do with this.
right,
We've,
right.
we've
All that
gotten
effort.
everything, we've gotten everything we can out of this, or it looks right, everything's good, and you've spent all that time to do that. This actually eliminates that process, or AI actually, that's been kind of a intangible benefit that we're now stating, that hey, this saves time because they don't have to focus on that anymore.
Yeah. It also saves the managers, their bandwidth too, not just the execution
Right.
of the job, but the managers being like, okay, someone called out, like, how do I prioritize it? It's doing all of that legwork for those managers as well. I do, if we can flip it back around, I do have a question for you, Stuart, if that's cool.
Okay, go
Uh,
ahead.
I just want to take a step back from the screens and the dashboards, like you mentioned, the death by dashboards. So, what is the bigger operational change that this creates for a denial management team? Like, what can they expect here?
Oh yeah, well, pretty much from an operational standpoint, the way that they perform today, not much change in of itself. I mean, as far as, they're going to come in, they're going to look in their queues, there's going to be denials there. What's going to change is the denials are going to be maximized and more efficient for them to work. And so they won't necessarily see any less because like I showed in that example, 30 denials that they may work in a day. That might be a little low. That was just an example. Some can work 50 denials in a day. But so that same amount's going to be there. So the quantity may not change, but it's definitely going to be the quality of the change is there operationally there. And then there's going to be kind of an after effect because I think their KPIs, and I would recommend that people change their KPIs to be tied to the revenue recovery rather than the number of denials that are worked. And I think also the KPIs need to be reflective of the complexity of the type of denial and the payer that they're working with. As I said earlier, some payers are much nicer than others or better to work with than others. And so if you're dealing with a problem child, right, then with a complex problem, then that's going to take longer to resolve. So I think tying it back to the revenue in addition to the number of denials worked. And so there has to be some ratio there because then sometimes the harder denials are the ones that have most revenue. So, tying that all together will make a difference. And then they can actually see the results. So I think operationally, where if someone has transparency to the good work they are doing, if someone can see the reward of what they're doing, they can take pride in that, and then they can actually strive to be better, at their job. Which, I speak, and you do too. We both speak to actual users. They're doing an amazing job, and they're overwhelmed, and they still come in, and they still, work at it. It's almost like baseball. Baseball is a game of failure, right? And you celebrate. You don't celebrate the failure, but you don't really have a lot of success in baseball to get to where you need to go. And, I mean, imagine I work denials all day. Submit a claim, it's denied. You're like, and then you work it again. So I think operationally, they won't see a big difference. I think the big difference is going to be the result.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I think that baseball reference is a cool one. Who
Yeah,
actually bats 1,000? Not any human I know.
not at all.
Yeah, I appreciate that wrap up, Stuart. And I think a lot of staff members, like you said, are just simply overwhelmed. Like it's just, even in the wake of all these solutions, like the AI, the automation, it's 2026. There's AI, popping out of every corner. And sometimes
Mhm.
they're like, does this really need to be a smart washing machine or smart fridge? And I think staff that are already burned out, they simply don't care about that because all they want to know is, can I do my job well? Am I going to be able to pay my bills?
Right.
so, so I think to kind of ease that, I think your comment of the operational workflow won't change drastically and the results will. I think it's actually a great thing to hear because it's essentially telling the boots on the ground like, hey, your job you're going to be able to do it well, and you're going to do less of the things you don't want to do. And you'll look better for it because of those results are being generated effectively. So yeah, so I appreciate that. All right, it looks like there's no questions here, Stuart. So it's weird to be the one wrapping up because that's usually your job. But I do want you to say the office hours phrase because it has to be in your voice for the podcast and per tradition.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Yeah. So yeah, and thank you for being a great host today. So that's awesome. So I really appreciate you stepping
Happy to be
in
here.
and playing along there. So yeah, because I can't show up every time, right? They got to go,
Right. You gotta
right?
switch it up.
So yeah, so and just so thank you for being on. So and if there's any questions that people have after the fact, I know there's no questions here. You know, you can always reach us. You just reach out and you go to our website to contact us. You can also go to our website at infinix.com for more articles, case studies, as well as solution insights on all things RCM. And by the way, I'm going to do a little plug, for Jonathan. We syndicated with Healthcare Now Radio as well, so you can hear us out there. And they always celebrate the top 2 podcasts of each given month. And we actually made the top 2, and it was our demo that Jonathan did of the referral follow-up agent that we have with our prior authorization. So awesome job, Jonathan.
Nice.
So I wanted to give
Thank
a
you.
quick plug about that. And so with that, please join us next week. We'd love to have you all join us.
Thanks, Stuart. Appreciate you. Great job.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to get notified when our next episode is online. For more information for how we can help you increase reimbursements at your company, check out our website at infinix.com. That's INFINX.com.